Welcome, everybody, to our Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an extremely exciting topic, which is shaping the future for advancing inclusivity in clinical trials. We are hearing more and more about this, obviously, within the life sciences industry globally, certainly with regulatory bodies now, FDA, MHRA, EMEA, obviously paying far more attention now to the diversity of trial participants within the clinical trials themselves. So we just thought, what a great time to be having a conversation with some amazing key speakers that are going to join me very shortly and come into this live event. But before we do, for those of you that have perhaps never joined a Lift Up live event before, let me give you a little bit of an insight. So we've been established now for almost 2 years. We kicked off in 2022. And Lift Up was born off the back of a group of female ambassadors within the Fraser Dove International Organisation here, a business in which I'm a part of. We've been established for 11 years and we are an executive search global recruitment specialist organisation. And we really just thought, look, we've got so many great relationships with senior leaders across the globe in life sciences, that what could we do to give back to our community and to the industry by creating podcasts, broadcasts, conferences, face-to-face meetings to help inspire, connect and champion the women across the industry and connect and bring everybody together. And that really is from academia, those that are looking to join the industry for the first time, all the way up to C-suite and board level advisory positions. So we started this journey nearly 2 years ago. I think I've had a 24 live broadcasts now with 50,000 global views and approximately 40 odd key speakers globally. So thank you so much for everybody that has been a part of this journey and has been along the way. It's always great when we do these live events as well, that we get a lot of repeat people coming into them. So what I would always love to say is, for those dialing in, please say hello in the comments, say where it is that you're dialing in from. It's always great to build your network. As we all know, our network is our net worth. And as usual, we're going to hold an interactive live Q&A session towards the end of this event. So once we get going, if you want to ask any questions to our key speakers, please pop in a queue at the front of your question within the comments. It just makes it a lot easier for me to navigate and pull out of the comments as I go. So yeah, I'm Louise Williams. I am the Managing Director here at Fraser Dove International, been a Lift Up Ambassador for the past 2 years, and really excited to dive into this broadcast, Shaping the Future for Advancing Inclusivity in Clinical Trials, with our key speakers. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Karen Correa into our broadcast. Hello, Karen. It's lovely to have you here today. Hi. Would you do the audience the honor of an introduction?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, hi everyone. My name is Karen Correa. I've had the opportunity to be in this industry for over 30 years and super excited about this topic. I grew up in this industry. Like many of you, I might not have knew what I was going to do when I graduated from college, but I had the opportunity to go into research and drug development. And I'm super excited to have 30 years of doing that in many different roles. So I'm super excited to share my passion about diversity in clinical trials and clinical trials inclusivity. And I'm excited to share with you all the experiences and things that I've learned along the way. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. Very inspiring background as well. For those of you that haven't connected with Karen before, definitely get connected with her on LinkedIn. It's privileged to sort of see and hear her journey throughout the industry. So thanks for joining us, Karen. I'm going to bring in Margaret. Margaret, if you could do the honours to the audience with an introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks, Louise, for the invitation. I'm Margaret Wong, and I have been working very closely with clinical groups, CROs, and submission. So from development to getting, the files to FDA, so clinical trials, it's, one of the very key elements. So I can bring, to the table how FDA is viewing this topic currently, and maybe some, innovations that can be very helpful in the future. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Some great experience and some thoughts to share as we go throughout this broadcast. And without further ado, we're going to bring in Anne Taylor. Anne, I know we've had a slight change in scenery, but we can hear and see you absolutely perfectly fine. So, Anne, would you like to do an introduction to the audience for us?
Thanks so much, Louise. I'm Anne Taylor. I apologize for my setting, but this is better than not being here, so I'm trying to pivot. I'm a physician clinician. I was actually trained as a primary care provider and work in community health centers. Then the rest of my career was in academic medicine and then the pharmaceutical industry, where I helped design and run trials and then helped in governance. And my last job in pharmaceutical company was a chief medical officer at AstraZeneca. So I've seen a lot along the spectrum of clinical trials and really committed to this need to increase the representation of patients with the diseases when we're studying new drugs. So thanks again for inviting me today.
Thank you, Anne. Slightly robotic, but I think I got that, so I'm hoping the audience too. But just for clarity, if not, Anne has spent solid years in life sciences, pharmaceutical organisations, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, was the chief medical officer at AstraZeneca, working underneath Pascal, the CEO. More recently, is now sitting as a board member across a number of organisations in the US. So hopefully we got that, Anne. Signal was a little bit up and down, but thank you for sharing. So it's a privilege to have you all as part of this conversation. I just want to jump back into the audience because I just want to say thank you for joining us. Maria from Global Reg Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us, Maria. We've got Ollie in our UK office. He's excited about hearing this topic. We've got Georgia as well joining us. We've got Heather as well here that's keen to say hello. So please keep the comments coming through. It's difficult to get round everybody, but I will try to do that as much as I can. So just pop in and say hello to help build your network into the comments. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into this topic because I feel like the last time we spoke about this, we could have talked for half a day. But I think the first question that we really want to cover off, and for the audience, I think that the way in which we want to approach this as best as possible is to try and look at the here and now and the reality of now and what the magnitude of awareness is really in the clinical trial, the diversity of trial participant spaces, look at some of the challenges, but then move forward into actually what does the future hold and what could we be doing moving forward to try and help create more diversity and inclusivity in these trials. So I'm going to kick off with, given your experiences, what is the reality of now and when does it, when it comes to the current landscape of inclusivity, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing and feeling within the market space? And Karen, I'll come to you first with this question, if that's okay.
Absolutely. As you know, this is a loaded question. So
yep.
because there's so many things that we can talk about. But I would say that the landscape has improved. Let's just be very honest and transparent. For many of us who have been in this industry for the decades that I have been in it, it is definitely improved, but it is still have for so longer to go. So unfortunately, we have a population of, let's take our Hispanic population, which makes about 18% of the population in the US, but only make about 1% of our population in our clinical trials. When we take the African American Black population, we make up about 13% of the population, but about 5% of the participants in our clinical trials. So it has definitely improved, even with the awareness. But we have so much more we need to do. And so what you see now is people bringing in organizations, patient advocacies, just bringing thoughts together, activities together that will be able to work together as one organization and one situation to move the needle. So I'm super excited when I see new roles within companies, when I see departments working on how do we improve it, when I see patient advocacy and healthcare providers working with pharma and biotech companies on how can we improve on diversity in clinical trials. And what we now from the innovation, which we'll talk about later, we could talk about some of those things that we're doing that we might have done in the past. We probably got like a little onion peel a little bit to move along, but now we're like really going into, because we now know we need patient access, we need awareness, and we need education. And those things need to be broken down little bit by little bit by little bit for each population, for each region that you're in, because what you do for something in the north, for someone in the north is different than for what you do for someone in the south. So I'm super excited to talk about those things, and I'll let one of the other panelists
Yeah, no, thank you, Karen.
opportunity in the future.
Oh, I know, and the passion is there, but it is like a snowball effect, right? Because it's like there's this whole educational piece to help spread the awareness, and then with the awareness will hopefully come better access for patients to be a part of these clinical trials. It's kind of one rolling into another, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. And you need
Yeah.
all three. You can't just have one, you know,
Yeah.
because we think that we're like, oh, we're gonna make sure everybody know about what clinical trials are. That's great that they know about it. Okay. But then when you do, they understand it. So that's really where they're educated. And then do we have access? Do they actually have the opportunity and the availability to be able to be a part of that and participate in that trial?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it happens at so many levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anne, I'll come to you now with this question, and maybe just putting a little bit of emphasis on what Karen was saying and your thoughts on this question, but also really, you know, what is the awareness out there? There were some really, you know, good statistics there that Karen just shared. How many people are actually really aware of those percentages and ratios? Because I mean, it's quite mind-blowing, really. Anne, if you've got good signal, can you answer some of those questions, do you think?
There's a lot of questions there. I really hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
I want to start first with why this is important. Besides the fact that it's just the numbers are unequal, it has an impact both in health equity, but in science. If we don't include all the people who have the disease in the trials, then we don't understand the impact of those drugs on different kinds of people. And we don't just talk about racial and ethnic differences, there's age differences, there's female versus male differences, there's regional differences and access to trials for people who have unusual diseases that live far away from a major academic center on one of the big coasts. So this is a really big problem. It doesn't have a simple solution. And a lot of the gaps are statistical, but they're also real people gaps and challenges with finding a trial near you with a doctor that knows how to do it. The other thing I'd raise, which I think is really important, is that, and Karen comes from the community trial space, it's important for communities to know what their research issues are and what their goals are. And they may not want to participate in a trial of something that's not really relevant for their community. But communities bottom up saying, hey, we have this problem. We want research on this problem to help our community is actually a really strong driver to help drive better behaviors and better outcomes.
Yeah, it's important for them to have a voice, isn't it? A voice to be heard, and then for action to take place. Yeah, thank you for that, Anne. I could hear you loud and clear there, so thank you. And Margaret, what's your response or thoughts in regards to this?
Yeah, I mean, both Karen and Anne, absolutely right on the target. It's amazing. Like shooting forward in the 20th century with information age, and yet still there are a lot of underrepresented group not able to participate in trials like this. Like Karen mentioned, you know, the African community, but there's like the Hispanic, the Asian. For new drug trials, those numbers are still very, very low, amazingly. And I think there's a lot of barriers to participation even today. Transportation, we talked about it, language barriers, and minority communities, they have very limited sometimes access to healthcare facilities. So, and maybe due to, you know, economic factors and other things, like you can't really participate in trials when you need to work like 9 to 5 and take public transportation, and then you have to go home and take care of your kids, right? Where did you gonna get the information, and where do you have time to even, study the information and participate? So these are the challenges. One thing that I think Anne mentioned is really, really key is the goal of clinical studies is to make sure, right, at the end of the day, the drug really works with the target population. So if the trial is, well, for those reasons we talked about, is biased toward, a certain group where, the others are underrepresented, the effectiveness of the drug may not be what we want it to be. So yes, scientifically, it's a big impact. And then we roll it out to the public, these drugs, right? So I think still today, that is a very big problem. And I think society as a whole is aware of that and is making progress. So I think I'm positive about the future.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Margaret. I completely and utterly agree. You touched upon the information aspect, and it's easy to say we need more participants in these trials, but actually, what is the reality of people taking part in them as well? And I don't know. There's a question here that had come through earlier, which was around the educational element. I mean, not only is it how important is it to educate underrepresented communities about these trials, but from an approach perspective as well, what considerations do individuals need to have? Where do they go to maybe get further education, or what can we be doing within our industry to further educate some of these communities? What's your thoughts on this one, Karen?
I mean, so we always talk about educating communities, different communities. But I think what we need to do, just everyone, is we need to start educating ourselves and then educating just our circle. If we could just do that, I mean, we're all about to come up on some holidays. This is a great time to have those conversations with family members to educate. I mean, if the average person just go and communicate with their circle, then that circle continues to help with the next circle. So I think we have to be intentional about our education. That means the conversation has to happen at multiple venues. So it's at dinner, it's at, when you meet someone new, if you're talking to someone. So if we could just start there, because I think sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, we need to have this big awareness campaign or something like that. But sometimes it's just daily. I mean, some people right now on the call, probably their family members do not even know what they do. So it's that piece right there is helpful. So I'm always educating my family. So if each person could take on that step. Now, the next part of that awareness and education is we need to educate our healthcare providers. There are a lot of healthcare providers who are not attached to clinical research and drug development and do not understand that process. So we need to start with educating the pharmacist, the dietitian, the social worker, the healthcare, the mental health provider, all of those different people that are in different organizations like community hospitals, federally qualified health centers, all of those organizations that are not actually directly working with research and drug development, so they understand it. Because if they are a resource, so that when a patient does hear about a clinical trial or in an access or availability of a clinical trial comes to them, they have different people that they can tap into and ask. Because trust me, I promise you, if something comes to a patient, they're going to go ask this person that they trust. So the front desk need to understand it. So we need to start there, and it will then trickle down to the patients. And I think that's the step that we keep seeming to forget a lot of educating, because I'm speaking with physicians and they don't understand clinical research. We have medical students, we have people coming out of school and they don't understand. So we have a big process in our education that there's a gap that needs to be filled. That is the first step.
Yeah, excellent. Very.
I love that, Karen.
Go for it, Anne.
I love that. I'm a big advocate of each of us talking, but I think you point out the step before that is that population of healthcare providers and pharmacists and everybody also needs to be representative of our country. And right now they're still predominantly white, and we need to bring more diverse people into the healthcare field at all levels, from the nurse assistants all the way up to the physicians, and having more people that look like me or look like you as your healthcare providers to talk to you about clinical trials will also improve the trust.
Yeah,
I think this is absolutely right on. I mean, to me, right, there's another element that I think is critically important, and that is to be honest about what the risk versus the benefits. And I think the transparency and honesty plus, highlight the positive experience and the positive outcome. Because a lot of times people don't trust the trials. And I think due to maybe a lack of information, a lack of understanding, and is quote going back to the education element, is really to understand, how it impacts them medically and around their community. But most importantly, I think is the information given needs to be honest and open. Plus a lot of, shared experiences, like real situations and not just talks. I think that other people's stories where they can hear, the outcome. And so that people can gain a better understanding and have a positive message. Otherwise, they just not quite sure, like, going to trial, what are they going to do to me, So,
Right. I mean, Margaret, that's a good point. If you don't mind, Louise, I'd like to
absolutely, Karen.
Yeah, you know what I tell people all the time. I think about this. Let's put this in a very basic fundamental. As as women, there's nothing like a new hair product, right? Before you use that hair product, how many times have you called a girlfriend? Have you tried that product? How does that curling on work on your hair? Or how does that product work in your hair? Does it really get rid of frizz? So that's just a product that we use for our hair. So imagine how we look for that confirmation from a girlfriend or a person, or just, a cooking utensil. Yeah. Have you bought this yet? Has it worked? We do that on all types as consumers. So why would we not think that patients would want that same type of confirmation and that comfort zone that, hey, you did a clinical trial before? What was it like? What did you experience? That's I think we sometimes we make it more complicated than it really needs to be. So Margaret, thank you for that. Exactly. We all want that confirmation from someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to add real quick is this is going to be like a 2-hour talk, but short. I think it's really important, like, the informed consent forms. A lot of times, obviously English is a given, right? Other languages, I have seen forms of the translation isn't that great. And I think people need to be educated, or they need to have someone who can speak the language locally to help them understand. Otherwise, it's like, okay, why am I consenting to this? So I think there's a lot can be done there in terms of educating.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely hit on something new, which was actually, I was looking at some of the other questions that were coming through from our group earlier, but what do you see as the most significant obstacles to achieving full inclusivity in clinical trials, especially for smaller healthcare organizations in the future? So that's a bit of an obstacle potentially, the language barrier. How palatable is some of this information for people to take in to fully understand what it is that they're going to be going through? A question, I guess, for me in regards to this is one of the obstacles from not just an accessibility perspective for specific participants, but at this point in time, how does the information at the moment for maybe those on this call that are not so familiar with, an R&D clinical trial process, but if a pharmaceutical organization or a biotech or a trial CRO, you need trial participants within your early phase. How does that information currently get fed down? Karen, can you give us a bit of an insight in regards to that?
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's many avenues, to be very honest and transparent. So depending on the study, you have selected your investigative sites or your clinic centers or your research centers to conduct that trial. At that center, you will have an investigator, or we say the physician. You will have the study coordinator, which is like a study nurse, and you have other staff a part of that trial as well, or sub-investigators and so forth. And those people will have whatever processes they utilize to reach their patients. They might have someone that calls patients. They might have some type of recruitment process that reaches out to the patient, and then they explain to the patient that there's a clinical trial, and then they go through that process and have a discussion with them to see if they qualify. And Margaret, back to just to bring and tie into what you said, it is supposed to be a conversation. It's not so here's a 20-page document you see. There is supposed to be an actual conversation with someone. I used to be a study coordinator, so I know what it's like to sit in front of a patient, and I did pediatrics, and explain it to the patient. And they're sitting there with an 8-year-old kid and explaining to this 8-year-old kid, hey, Miss Karen is going to see you several times in the next couple of, in the next couple of months, and these are the things that we're going to be doing. So it's supposed to be a process. So that's one way. But the patient may also hear about it from their physician, and that they might see it on an advertisement on social media. They might see a flyer or a bulletin. But at the end of the day, they will be in front of that research person as well as that physician, and there will be a conversation through the informed consent process. That is obviously for chronic diseases. If it's an acute, like an emergency type of situation, is a little bit different, but it's still the same dynamics of what happens. That's usually how they hear about it. But remember, if that patient is not a part of that doctor and that center, how do they hear about it? Through that ad? Will they respond to that ad? So it's so many dynamics, and again, so many gaps. And I preach it, and I continue to do it. Again, one out of 10 people are served at a federally qualified or community hospital in the United States. So when you're thinking about that, you're talking about 30 million people that are being served at centers that are probably not doing research. So they are not doing research. They're not being tapped into. They're not being asked. They're not being invited to participate.
That's a shocking amount, isn't it? Blimey. Okay. No, really insightful.
Add, Karen has explained the process really, really well, but there is one other source when you're doing a study of something big like vaccines, where community leaders, especially pastors and other well-known community figures in a situation where people go on a regular basis, have also been amazing supporters for recruiting people into certain kinds of trials. And I think that's really important. That's what I mean about the community needing something, and the pastor's not going to support every single request, but they're going to support requests that they think are relevant and important for their community, which I think is important for us to understand.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ann. You're correct. We do utilize a lot of other avenues to be able to provide that bridge in the community to bring access and awareness of those trials. So thank you for that. That's a great reminder.
Thank you for that, Anne. And I guess this rolls into from an obstacle perspective before we move into more of the future focused elements. But how do financial barriers impact the inclusivity? What are some of the strategies that, for making trials a bit more accessible to the lower income patients? I mean, we had a conversation about this as a group last week, and I was a bit mind blown. And actually, I didn't even realize, certainly depending on, I know we're talking a little bit more US centric, but certain countries around the world will have different forms of health insurances and access to healthcare generally. But Karen, I'll come to you, and then Margaret, get your thoughts on this as well.
Okay, so I'll be very brief. There's a lot of things from a financial strain that we see within research, drug development, and reaching patients from an access thing. Unfortunately, when you have an underserved and underinsured population, if you have a trial where the standard of care needs to be, taken care of by the patient, and that patient can't afford their standard of care, that has already become an issue with them being a participant in a clinical trial. Oncology is one that we see a lot of. Or if there's some type of genomics testing or something that they will need to get done that they would not normally had done, had completed because of the type of insurance or something they have. So that keeps them as an exclusion criteria that they will not be able to meet, or an inclusion criteria they not be able to meet because they don't have that access to those types of testing and diagnostic tools and things of that nature. That's one piece. And then again, we talked about, Margaret, you talked about transportation. Extremely, it's hard for people to understand that everybody is not in the same situation. I share all the time that the average person goes to a doctor, their doctor might not ask, well, do you have any food insecurities? Or do you feel safe at home? Well, those are the types of questions that you will see someone being asked at a federally qualified health center or a community hospital, because they're in a different situation. So when you are asking someone if they have food insecurities, do you honestly believe at that point they're thinking about a clinical trial? So you got to be able to address the first need before the second need. You know what I mean? And so it's like those types of basic fundamentals that we sometimes seem to miss a lot, and cannot close that gap. So it's bigger than all four of us on the call.
It's really interesting though. I don't think I'd ever really thought of patients necessarily sitting in these, health centers that depending upon what they've been requested to perhaps join from a trial perspective, actually whether, you know, certain levels of insurances actually cover certain trials, and if they can't financially cover it, then they're almost not included. I guess I didn't really think of it that deeply, but this comes back to the awareness piece, doesn't it, and the education. And Margaret, is there anything for your thoughts in
Yeah,
regards to this question?
I think, again, Karen, you hit, right on every point here. I think this question has two elements to it. Number one is the previous question related to small healthcare facilities. Many people just think, okay, the challenge is enrollment is definitely one challenge, but the other thing is the financial. The background was financial to support the trial. For instance, like, you need to hire resources, you need data management, data analysis, and the logistics of, tracking, monitoring, all of that needs to be taken into consideration. And smaller healthcare facilities may be challenged, not only, the participants, but even the facilities themselves may not be able to support a large diverse trial for many reasons. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the complicated thing is you may not be able to get the people if you don't have, let's say, incentive. I think cost constraints is a big deal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Again, the transportation issue, daycare, for example, strategies maybe to offer some incentive for participation. Like people need to take time off work in order to participate. And, if they have little kids, who's going to take care of them? So if these complicated life issues can be taken care of in some ways by the trial, then I think it will, facilitate them to participate.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very well said, Margaret. And Anne, I don't, before we move on from this question, I don't know what your thoughts are around some of the conversations I've been having over the last couple of months around the regulatory bodies paying more attention now to the trials when they're reviewing submissions and things, that it's kind of impacted the cost of these trials, and that the trials are actually going up in value. Are you seeing that from a organization, corporate world perspective?
Yeah. So yes, two ways. One is that there is some additional cost if you have to cover standard of care, you have to pay for transportation. I think it's now considered reasonable to cover time off work, as long as the amount that you're providing is not considered to be coercive to participate in the trial, which is a really careful balance. But in addition to, but that cost is, it's something, but it's not a huge amount. If you consider that you might be paying $1,000 for an MRI, the cost mm-hmm. of transportation and even covering time off work is far less than that. So it's a balance. But the other thing to remember is that setting all this stuff up takes longer. It means finding new sites that may not have as much experience. It may mean, as Margaret mentioned, covering a part-time study coordinator who comes in and out. And so there are additional costs to the site. And then setting that all up just takes time. And I think companies frankly worry more about the time delay than they mm-hmm. do about the incremental costs. And that means that we need to find ways to set all this stuff up in advance and have the infrastructure in place rather than inventing it for every trial.
Sure.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, just to help Ann out, and that's a great point. And I just to kind of recap what you're saying, and I think one of the things I think you said was really great is that people seem to forget it is the time and the setup at the beginning of a trial. So you need to find that vendor or that organization for you that is able to provide what type of payment process is going to be done and how that's going to be tracked and how that's going to be reported and all of that, and what type of documents the patient is going to see, because that now has to be everything that they read or see needs to be IRB approved. Like it's more of just the process along the way. So that little bit of $40 or $80 or $200 per patient, that's not where the cost is. The cost is all the processes that go along with getting everything set up and putting it in place so that we can have something that we can come back that is reportable, trackable, be able to show and demonstrate what we did. And I know you talked about the FDA, because what's really important in that FDA action plan about, they're not only wanting to know what populations that you'll be doing and where did you get the data, how to get those numbers. The last big piece they're asking you is, how are you going to do it? So what's that how part that you got to be able to explain, and the how is all of that infrastructure and things that you're going to be doing. So I think that's really important. So great point, Ann. I want to talk about, it's not the $30 or $100.
Yeah, it's the pre-planning.
It's all the planning and the process, the timeline it took to get that into place.
Yeah.
And just real quick to add is, the exciting thing about it is FDA just recently, I believe this year, they published a guideline that sort of required diversity and specifically underrepresented groups in clinical studies. So I think there's a great push there where this planning is upfront, right? That it's required to be considered and not something like afterthought, or trying to, kind of, I would say, compromise a certain part of it due to time. So by making it a preliminary requirement, I think there's a lot of good, good planning at the very beginning is very key.
Yeah, I know. I think, thanks, Fran, for bringing that up. And I think that there's a lot of synergy, obviously, across mindsets here. And you're definitely seeing, it's interesting, you said that the FDA specifically brought that in sort of more as a regulation this year, because that is definitely what we're hearing more and more in the market space. And I think Brett's just popped in here, excellent, Karen, obviously very much agrees with what you were backing up with Anne saying. We got Sean saying we need to embed this from the outset of the clinical development planning as we define our global target population. Thank you, Sean, for sharing that. So I think, like, maybe let's move a little bit ahead. We've talked about some of the challenges, the realism of now, and some of the things that we're feeling and seeing on the educational front. But looking ahead, I guess, what areas of growth do you foresee, to be taking place now and in the next 5 to 10 years from a clinical trial inclusivity perspective? What are your thoughts with this one? I'll come to you, Margaret, first.
Sure. Yeah, I'm very optimistic. Again, I think there's a lot of technologies out there. I've been reviewing a lot of AI technology these days. We talked a little bit about that previously. AI is not a cure-all, first of all. It is still in its infancy. However, I see a lot of positive, I think, trends toward that. For instance, AI can accelerate drug development. It can actually go about and identify where the underrepresented population is. And even, the algorithm can detect that, the trial is underrepresented in terms of the sample size or in terms of the diversity. It can also, offer things like, checking the data to see whether the result is effective. What are the missing elements of that? And even, go about and pairing, the applications where you can pair, certain diverse groups of people, underrepresented group of people with the facilities. Where are the facilities that's hosting these clinical studies? And there is like patient mapping, enrollment, application. There's a lot going on, and I've seen a lot of traction in the investors world as well. So that's just telling me the trend is moving in the positive direction, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Margaret. I completely agree. We're definitely seeing further investment, obviously going in from a lot of biotechs, organizations, but just the med device industry, using a lot of AI tools, technology. Generally speaking, we're seeing certainly probably more positive conversations within this space. But interestingly, there's definitely that element as well from using AI from a clinical trial data perspective is, how reliable is the data sometimes that we're using right now, because the information that's being fed a lot into these AI machines is data that's, 10, 20, 30 years, old trial data or up to recent trial data where, as we're already discussing, there isn't a lot of inclusivity or diversity within those previous trials. So is it going to take 10, 15 years from now where actually some of the AI clinical data that we can extract is really then going to give us a bit more of a truly authentic picture? And so I think there's been some real interesting conversations regarding this that I've had in the last handful of months. So, Karen can come to you before Anne in regards to this. So are you hearing or seeing something similar? Should I jump to you, Karen, first? I don't know whether it's worth hearing your thoughts.
Yes, absolutely. So, and specifically to the way I look at it with the technology, just kind of tapping off of what Margaret is saying, and I agree with you, Louise, is about the AI. I think that the past data is obviously going to give us some constraints. But I do think that the AI and machine learning is so quickly that it's going to catch up faster than maybe we think it's going to catch up.
Yeah. Okay.
My hope is that AI starts to be able to tap into the patients a little bit more to understand how people think and how they are attracted, because we know that if we bring it to their attention, we want to, how they say someone needs to see something 7 times or so before they respond.
Yeah.
I want AI to find out how do we can get people to respond quicker than 7 times, because we don't have the financial value 7 times for someone to see something. So I want to figure out what is it that first 1 or 2 times that someone sees something and they're able to respond. So I'm looking for the AI and the machine learning to really catch up with, us as humans and be able to reach out to our populations and to help. In reference to the inclusivity and I think that Anne said something that I think is really good. We have to look at the workforce. We have to make sure that we are having a better inclusivity of the people that are at the, at all levels working in research and drug development to be able to change the dynamic. So, I mean, we need to just tap into populations. Do we have people from all representative groups to be able to reach out to our population? Because when you bring a diverse group of people to the table, you have a diverse thought at the table. So I really want to make sure that we have more diverse thought at the table. And when I say that, I mean a diverse thought at the table at every single level. Every level needs to have that diverse thought. We can't have all men in the boardroom. We can't have all women in the boardroom. Like, we got to have both. We can't have one specific subpopulation in a group. We got to have all groups represented so that we can have that diverse of thought. Now, does that mean that one person can speak for the whole population? No, but they can bring a perspective that they might not have been able to bring before. Another thing, and last but not least, from reference to innovation and trends, is we always talked about grassroots. It may not seem like it's not new, but it needs to be more innovative. The grassroots efforts are never going to go away. They're the backbone to who we are as humans. We cannot take that piece out. That piece is so important, and that's where trust comes from. Trust comes from that grassroots effort. I don't care how innovative you are. We are going to trust a person way more than we're going to trust the AI. So we want to make sure that we continue to improve on the innovation and provide funding so that those grassroots efforts can be able to reach and be able to provide that trust mechanism. And that trust is going to improve, because if someone's trusting it, their behavior changes, we increase diversity, and then we have
growth. Yeah. 100%. Very well said, Karen. Yeah. And Anne, and what are your thoughts in regards to this question?
Yeah, I just want to second it. I think the fact that our data sets are not representative so far, because they were done on mostly white populations, as we laid out at the beginning, is a problem in their ability to project what's going to happen to a broader population. But I want to caution that there are also arguments that some communities that have tended not to contribute data feel strongly that it's their data, and it reflects on their populations, and has, especially if you go into genetic data, has really implications for their individual population. So these are not going to be easy problems to solve, because it needs to really be shared. And a company coming in and say, here's our data, is not going to be the solution. And it's yet another place where we need to work with the communities from the bottom up. That I really feel strongly there's a lot of infrastructure to build for these community relationships, and they can't be one company, one individual, to the city of Detroit, because the city of Detroit is going to get calls from 100 different people trying to set stuff up, and we need to figure out some ways to build this more as a community.
Yeah, love that.
And
Yeah,
I also, just
go
real
on,
quick,
Margaret. Yeah.
want to add about future trends. I think these days, telehealth and telemedicine. I think depending on the trial, people can utilize, mobile monitoring. So to eliminate the need for physically taking time off, physically travel to the site. And I think more and more we can leverage the technology to help reach a wider diverse group of people. Like in the past, if we do physical, like enrollment, for example, you can do flyers, talk to doctors, and so, but you're still kind of limited within that community. But if we utilize, technology, for instance, today, we can reach globally for enrollment. And not only that, AI has a way. There are two types of AI. There's the static AI, where you have a formula and it performs what you want to say, basically. There's a dynamic AI, where it keeps learning as new information and more data, more enrollment, more diversity comes in. It learns how to detect what is optimal. So I think there's a lot of positive trends out there. And besides, the data sets can be audited. And people nowadays can test the AI models and detect any biases in the AI. Obviously, the human factor cannot be taken out and just trust AI 100%. I don't mean that. But certainly, a combination of human involvement in AI would definitely push our progress forward.
Agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you as well. I'm very conscious of the time because it's creeping on already, and I saw this one come through our group earlier, and I know that from a leadership perspective, it's something that often gets asked when I'm speaking to senior leaders in the market space. So, what role do perhaps senior leaders have within life science organizations, farmers, bios, to help promote this inclusivity element? Is there anything specifically that stands out in your mind, Anne?
Absolutely. They have to walk the talk and set the culture from the top down. And if they say that they want their trials to be representative, they have to be representative and not accept somebody who says, well, to save a month, we cut this out, right? It's a culture from the top down. And it's hard because it means changing your expectations and working with people that are different than you.
Yep, I love that. And Karen, anything to add to this?
I don't know, and you stole my thunder. I was thinking
the point.
You got to walk the talk. But I do think that leaders also have a role to be very transparent and honest. I mean, just because you're a leader does not mean you have to know it all. And so I think when people are authentic, you bring trust right there. I mean, I think authenticity will go so far if we could just have leaders be like, I really don't know that, and I don't, and so I'm coming to you to get that understanding, and just have a leader to be able to be authentic about something like that will be great. And then also being authentic when you don't make the best decision. That is another thing I think sometimes people seem to forget, because people feel like you should never apologize. I don't like when people say that. I struggle with people who don't know how to apologize. It is okay to be wrong. That's what makes you human. If you're correct, that's what I expect AI to do, is not make mistakes. But I do expect you to make mistakes because you are human. And if you come to me and says, you know what, Karen, I thought we should do, but you know what, maybe that wasn't the best decision. So what do you think? And I do, I always just do that with my team. And I'd be like, I don't think I really know what to do with this. I'm asking you guys. Like, I think that's when you respect someone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I want our leaders to really to be able to see that, because that's what people are really going to be like, I can trust that person.
Yeah. Love that. Anything to add to that, Margaret?
Yeah, I mean, both of you already said, what I wanted to say, but I would like to also add that it's critically important in terms of, walk the talk, is create policies, right? As leaders, we can document right? Not only just verbally, but create policies that is working toward that end, and working closely with regulatory bodies and pushing that border and pushing the awareness, so that, and like in 2024, it's exciting to see FDA is, for cancer study, for instance, they are really scrutinizing to broaden, it used to be very narrowly selected, to broaden that a little bit for the trial, and not really, like a lot of times elderly, they have other health problems, and sometimes they're excluded, and then it ended up the trial not being very effective and representative. So not just from a demographic, but also from a disease perspective.
Yeah.
So all these things come into play, and I think as leaders, number one is, you'll be able to collaborate with the community, collaborate with government agencies, and create policies that is working toward that end.
Yeah, I love that. I think you've hit a really important element there. I think all three of you have come and added, your own thoughts, but collectively some really great diversity of thought there, literally, because I think that the way I see it as well, leadership in the organizations, almost has a bit of a duty as well to that connectivity with academias and other scientific research sites and educational universities. It's not just about keeping it all within corporate. So that promotion across different variety of businesses, universities, health centers, really comes into play as well. So yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Margaret. We could probably keep going. We've got a lot of other things to always cover, but I'm conscious we're probably on to our last question now. So one that actually came up here, which was really around the advice. Yes, I just popped it up. So for those interested in promoting inclusivity, if there's anybody here within the audience thinking about what could they personally do in clinical trials, healthcare, what advice would you give on a kind of practical steps for any individual to perhaps take? Or if they're in a health center at the moment and they're trying to be a part of more, is there any advice that you would give? This could be short and sweet advice. Margaret, any thoughts to this question?
Well, yeah, I think number one is people need to be aware. There's this health disparity, right? And Karen, I think, mentioned a little bit about before educating other people, you have to educate yourself. So I think the awareness of that is really, really key. Like, the awareness that clinical trials, underrepresented groups are really, really, low in number. So first, I think the education, and then by having that experience and knowledge, you can then share it with the community. You within your sphere of influence is to find opportunities to, allow that information to be shared in the community. Participate in maybe events. There are advocate groups that people can connect to that really, advocating for certain underrepresented groups. There are a whole bunch of them out there that people can connect themselves and also kind of network and exchange, information and shared experiences.
Yeah, love that. I think we're really seeing global networks, community groups really growing, certainly post-COVID, and potentially that could be because people were a little bit more isolated throughout that time, and then post that period and post-COVID, groups, networks, communities, all these things have been built, whether it's virtually and then eventually face to face. So yeah, I think that's a great bit of advice. Karen, anything to add to this on your side?
No, Margaret said it all. Margaret, great job. And it is about, educating ourselves and then being a part of that process of educating others. I also, and I do like the most important about us partnering with different groups and partner with groups that you might not have partnered with before. I think that's a big piece. So we have to step out our comfort zones. And we always, and I just want to put a shout out here. We always talk about the national organizations that we work with. There's so many mom and pop organizations, and family-owned little organizations where there's only maybe 5 or 10 people working with that group, but those 5 or 10 people might be helping hundreds of people that you don't know about. So let's start to help. If we really want to say we want to tap into our communities, that's got to be all levels of the community. So I think that's just really, really piece. And that inclusivity is also about listening. You know,
Yeah.
my dad just always said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
I love that.
Listen to other people and other subpopulations so you can understand. We don't know it all. We want to learn from them. And when you do that and you truly listen to understand someone and
Yeah.
understand what their challenges are and what they need, and that you're going to be able to do some great partnerships. So I just want to
Yeah.
encourage everyone to step into those types of places.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you, Karen. Really inspiring.
I love
And
that, Karen.
yeah. Anything to add to that, Anne?
The listening. Yeah, I would add one thing for people, especially in organizations that provide healthcare that are compelled by this diversity argument. I would also suggest you educate yourself specifically on the diseases that you're taking care of. What is the representation? Who has that disease? So that you can then say, okay, these are the people that have the disease. These are the people we're treating. So that means there's a big gap here. And when you come to your organization with data of what you're missing, then you will be much more compelling than with just a simple, ethics idea. But to be really clear that we've just skipped this many people and that's not right is very compelling argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. Thank you. Some really, really great bits of advice from you all. And I've really enjoyed this session, but we've already rolled over. So we're probably going to have to say goodbye now. But thank you so much for your participants and your words of wisdom, your thoughts, your advice. It's been really great talking about such an important topic because, I think it truly is the amount of conversations I'm having with people in the industry in regards to this right now is huge, really. It's on a weekly basis. So it's been a great topic. I hope it inspires many to get out there, educate themselves in specific areas if they feel like they want to make a difference or they want to support certain community groups or, bring some connectivity together against academia and corporate world. But, it's all about closing the gap. So thank you so much for the audience as well for joining us today. Thank you again to you all as a panel and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.